Hello and welcome to the Winners Never Quit podcast. Start your week the right way with a laugh and a dose of motivation. Listen to the stories of our guests, learn from their experiences and how they have built a winner's mindset. Hosted by myself, Jack Jarvis, and if you could like, follow or subscribe to the podcast, I would really, really appreciate it. Now today, ladies and gentlemen, is a real treat and a first for the Winners Never Quit podcast, as I'm not interviewing one person, I'm interviewing two people, Frenchy and Paul Jacobs. Now, they've got an incredible story. They've got a massive challenge coming up, and I cannot wait to hear more about it. So, boys, how are we doing?
Yeah, good. Good to be here.
Yeah, good. Thank you for driving all the way. You've come from Brighton, haven't you, this morning?
Paul has, yeah.
Paul, yeah.
Yeah, I've come from
I'm halfway, yeah.
Awesome. Now, you two are ex-servicemen in the British Army, and you'll come together to do an amazing challenge. So, Paul, do you want to start with what this challenge is and tell the people what you've got coming up?
Wow. I've just come back from doing Everest Base Camp, first British Warbler to do Everest Base Camp, followed by just doing the London Marathon for the third time. And then I ended up bumping into Frenchy in a very famous road in London. I think it's Downing Street at some event. Got chatting to him, and basically my dream is to be the first British Warbler to summit Everest, and there's a few challenges before that. And I'll let Frenchy explain what.
Yeah, because it's not just Everest, is it, Frenchy? You'll probably put a little bit more meat on the bones, so go on, if you don't mind filling us in.
So you've got something called the 7 summits, which are the 7 highest mountains on the 7 continents. But we've added a couple of extra onto that to be able to building up the training and everything else. So we're actually going for 10 summits, highest summits in different places. So starting with a local one, Mount Snowdon. And the reason we're doing that is to try and get more people involved, so people can come along and join us for the day. It'll be the 14th of October.
Great plug there, mate. Get that in early.
No signing up or anything. Just turn up and be a part of the start of the journey with Paul. And then from there we go to Mount Toubkal, which is the highest mountain in North Africa, and then sort of carrying on. So Kosciuszko in Australia, Aconcagua in Argentina, so South America, Denali in North America, then Mount Elbrus is the highest mountain in Europe, but that's in Russia, and there's something going on with Russia at the minute. So
two ex squaddies getting a visa for Russia, mate. Let me know how that one goes.
So that's closed at the minute, but these things always happen around the world. Mountains, things close and then reopen again, and hopefully peace will come to Ukraine soon, and then the mountain will reopen shortly afterwards. But we're also going to do Mont Blanc, which is the highest mountain in Western Australia. Western Europe.
Right, that's a great straight away.
I don't want to go
now. And it's great to do Mont Blanc anyway. It's quite a technical mountain, even though it's not that high compared to some of the others.
It's no joke. Like people die on that every year trying to summit it.
I've been up it before, quite a few years ago, and it's quite a cheeky mountain, but it's also the birthplace of mountaineering, so it's a great one to do early on in Paul's journey. And then going all the way Mount Vincent in Antarctica, and then finishing with Mount Everest in Asia. So we've got a 4-year plan to get these mountains all done. But it's we think it's definitely achievable. It's gonna be hard work along the way.
I definitely think it's achievable, boys, but it's a big challenge, isn't it, mate? I mean, this would be tough for anyone. But Paul, like you said, you're blind, mate. Let's call it how it is. So where did the idea for this challenge come from, mate?
Lying in my hospital bed back in 2009. This weekend just gone, 20th of August, was 14 years that I'm complete blind. Lost my sight in Afghanistan. But when I was lying in my bed, the hospital bed at Selly Oak, which isn't there no more, it was something inside me that I had to keep pushing myself, and I never got to push myself in the military to the standard that I wanted to, or I believe I could reach. So now I have to push myself as the blind man. So I don't just want to be a blind man, I want to be the blind man.
You said you've always wanted to push yourself, right? Do you mind sort of taking us back? So for your childhood, where did that come from, that sort of drive and desire to be better, to want more?
Well, I'm an orphan. So I suppose it comes from there, bouncing around different homes and picking up different skills off of different people and different adults. And then, like most, or some, I got myself into a bit of bother, and I see an opportunity, and that only opportunity, either prison or to go to the army. So I joined the army, and yeah, it wasn't a very long career. It was a very short career, 2007 till 2012. I was injured at the end of 2009 on Herrick 10 after being based in Northern Ireland. And then from 2010, I've just thrown myself into all these different events: climbing, running, cycling, swimming, boxing.
You said you got yourself into a bit of trouble. So how old were you when you joined the army?
I was 17 and a half.
Did it give you that sort of direction, that focus in life?
It gave me that security that I had, I suppose, I'd already had from the children's homes and foster homes. There was that safety net. But once I'd left the system, there was no safety net. So I was run free, run wild.
So what made you pick the rifles?
I think they picked me.
Yeah. The only ones who'd take you, is it?
Yeah, I'm now part of the Trifles, mate. But yeah, no, it was... I just... There wasn't any... I didn't know anything about the army. It was just, yeah, I want to join, and...
I didn't want to go to prison.
Basically. Basically. My brother... So there's a story about prison as well. So my brother at 16 had died in prison.
Flipping heck.
Yeah. So I understood about that, and I understood about the streets and, yeah, different things in Brixton. And
Yeah.
growing up as a lad.
As a little scally.
Basically.
So how long were you in the army before you went to Afghanistan, mate?
2007 to 2009, so literally just a very short period of time. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed the blokes, and that sounded wrong.
Yeah. Mate, it's 2023, mate. You could, whatever you're into, I'm not bothered. So you've been in the army, mate, 2 years. Were you excited to go to Afghan?
Oh, 100%. Because it was all through depot. The build up to it and everything, and yeah, I just... like anyone, that's what you join up for, isn't it? It's to go on tour. That's the whole point of joining the infantry, and that mindset and the propaganda that's pumped into us all as young soldiers, be the best and all that, blah, blah, blah.
Well, it's obviously rubbed off, mate, because, like you said, you lay in that hospital bed quite severely injured, and still you were thinking about, right, I'm going to summit the 10 highest peaks, some of the highest peaks in the world.
Well, within 6 months of being injured, I'd gone up Kilimanjaro. So, yeah, been put in a coma and then waking up and then being able to walk and talk, and I ain't never shut up. And then, yeah, doing the London Marathon and Kilimanjaro and doing everything backwards, really, a triathlon, half marathon to 5K.
Yeah.
I think it's supposed to be the other way around.
Yeah, it is, mate. It is, yeah.
That's what happens when you go to Ireland.
So, mate, do you mind talking about that first tour? How did you find it you would have been, what, 19, 20-year-old?
I was 19, turned 20 when I was out there, yeah. All I can remember is when you step off the Hercs, it's all very exciting when the build up to it, the training, putting your combats on, going from green combats to desert combats. There's that excitement, the build up, that little bit of pressure, the screws tightening as time gets by. Then you go on your last weekend home, or wherever home is, do what you got to do, and yeah, and now you're sitting at the airport and you're waiting, and yeah, boom, you're on that Hercules and you land at Bastion. It's
boom. No pun intended there, okay.
But it's when you're looking around, you're in Camp Bastion, you're looking at these fellas, and they've got this bleak faces where you know they've seen some real action, and I don't know, they're tired, emotionally tired, but physically strong. And you're looking at them, and you're looking at their uniforms and all scraggy, and it's just, there's something about that, and I wanted to be a part of that, and I wanted to make sure I was part of what they had gone through. And yeah, I suppose when you're in depot, they always talk about the 1,000-yard stare and all that, and I really wanted to understand what it was truly like to be around someone who had that, and just be in and amongst it and be an infantryman and do my bit, I suppose. And once I was out there in the fob, I suppose that's when you get a bit tear-jerky, it's a bit tiring, it's a bit emotionally hard, because now you with all these fellas, and you've got to rely on each other. And if one element of that falls apart, then the whole thing could fall apart. And yeah, no, it was good. I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it. I know a lot of blokes say that, but I thoroughly did enjoy it. I actually, towards the end of my tour, I actually signed on to do a back-to-back tour with my OC.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to stay out there because I had nothing to come back to Blighty for. So,
mate, that's fucking wild. It sounds. Did you think you maybe I know you said you enjoyed it, but it sounds a little bit like you might have romanticised it. Was there a point where you thought, when you got out there and you thought, fucking hell, this is real?
Oh, 100%. 100%. So I was talking about this to somebody the other day. I went to school down in Ramsgate, and I'm in Camp Bastion of all the places, and I'm just loading up my weapon to get on the Chinook to fly us out to the fob. And a fella comes up and goes, "Hello, Jakey, lad." And I'm the geezer I went to school with. Just like I'm loading up a weapon, I'm looking at him, I'm looking at my weapon, I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking, oh, God. And then, yeah, that was the same time the Chinook was being RPG'd, and that was a hell-raising moment. And, yeah.
That must have been, like being in the helo at that point. Was that quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Did you feel quite helpless?
You just if people are not shaking with that, and you can hear the metal being tinged off all the shrapnel hitting the side of it, and you're whatever thousands of feet up in the air in this Chinook, and part of you is begging to go back to Bastion where you're safe. You know what I mean? I don't want to go forward to the fob, and you say, please just go back to and I can get a pizza and a can of Coke and Jack, I know, but you in that position, what do you do? You know what I mean? There's not a lot you can do, is there? You can't pick up the weapon system and go full for you. You're a sitting duck. But we went carried on and went on to the next position. And
you actually were awarded the George Medal, weren't you, for bravery?
Yeah.
I'll just say, Paul rolled his eyes then, so he's probably been asked about this 100 times. But would you mind telling us about the events of that day, because it's an amazing story.
Okay, thank you. So the medal is an amazing achievement, and I never thought I'd ever be in line for such a thing. But at the same time, 20th of August was only yesterday, depending on when this pod goes out. And 2 men died that day in the name of their country. Sergeant Paul McAleese and Private Jonathan Young. And to me, that's what the medal represents. We was all in and amongst it, and it was down to us 3. And yeah, that's what it represents. Their sacrifice for their country, Sergeant Paul McAleese and Private Jonathan Young. And I'd rather them be here than a bit of tin on my chest. But it is a lovely award, and I'm honoured, and that's why I try to do as much good as I can.
An amazing way to look at it. It's not the first time I've heard stuff like that. I remember I was speaking to a friend, and he said, yeah, don't go wrong, it's nice to be written up, but loads of lads did stuff that never got written up.
100%.
It was just the way it happens, sort of thing. And
I think it was just being ginger, like the whole disability thing, and they have to do their bit.
Yeah. So you were Valorman that day, weren't you?
Yeah.
Lead Valorman. So can you remember like what happened and how the day sort of panned out?
Yeah, I can. Early dawn. Jonathan Young and his section were boosting us up because it was the last couple of weeks in that particular fob. And the rifles were leaving.
Because it was towards the end of your tour, wasn't it?
Literally 2 weeks.
Fuck's sake.
2 weeks, yeah.
God, as if you'd not had enough bad luck, being born ginger.
I know,
2 weeks before the end of your tour, mate. Jeez.
I know. Yeah, so that day, Johnny Young was supposed to... He was the lead scout, Ballon man. And we'd gone down Pharmacy Road. I don't know if you know or ever heard of this road, but Pharmacy Road took the lives of many NATO soldiers. Very notorious part of Sangin. And basically, Sergeant Paul McAleese was QRF that day. I was 2nd or 3rd in the patrol, and somehow ended up 2nd. And they sent Johnny up an alleyway, and to the right, all I can visualise in my head, to the left there was a wall that had been totally smashed, and it was a good sort of peeping hole for our friends. And then there was probably an 8-foot alleyway from what I can remember. Then there was a bit of dead ground that went up, and then there was some sort of shadowy dead ground from what I can remember. And then there was a big open compound area where the walls had been smashed down, and pretty much in the middle of that was an old armoured JCB that had been pinged in the past. So another position where the enemy could hide from and ping. But anyway, they sent Johnny Young up this alleyway, and it was all rubbled, and I still don't understand it to this day why you'd have had to have gone up there, but it is what it is. We are where we are, and he's gone up there. And before I could get to him, he's gone bang. And I've caught part of the blast, and I've ended up in a bit of a ditch and in between our lads covering me and aiming down Pharmacy Road as well as down the alleyway. But the way I landed, I'm sort of facing more the alleyway going up into sort of the dead ground, and yeah, it just sort of went on from there really. And then I'm trying to retrieve Johnny Young, bring him back. I tried to do my best that day, and there was a bit of a contact, and the secondary device went off with Sergeant Paul McAleese, and he was killed outright basically. And then I was part of that injury.
What injuries did you sustain?
So on the second blast, the shrapnel smashed through my nose and my right eye. It lodged in the brain, cutting through my cheek, my throat, my arm, my leg, groin. Not much left of me, is there?
Yeah, I was gonna. All right, mate, we get it. You were injured.
Oh, I blew Peter badge, please.
Can you remember being in the hospital in Afghanistan, or was it literally, did you just wake up back in Birmingham?
So from what I've been told from the medics on the ground, and there was a contact, and to scoop 2 dead blokes up and me, who they thought might have been dead as well. Because obviously the injuries that I sustained, was more than a HEMCON and an FFD could square away. So there must have been life or something. But apparently they brought a JCB out and scooped me up. And scooped up the lads as well to protect us from incoming.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've met up with my medic since then, and amazing woman, fantastic, and I've got a lot of respect and love for her. And apparently, I've got this vivid imagination. I don't know if I can remember waking up in a bed and being on a Herx. And I don't know if that's my head playing games with me or it actually happened, but I remember being like all tubed up and not being able to open my eyes, but hearing, knowing that I'm on a Herx and I could feel the propellers or the engine, if you know what I mean.
Appreciate you sharing that. So you're now back in Birmingham and you're going up Kilimanjaro a few months later, but what I want to know is, when you woke up, was it instantly you knew you had to do something to try and, I'm guessing you raised money for charity when you climbed Kilimanjaro. Was it straight away, or was there a moment where you fell down? Like, how did you get yourself back on the horse so quickly?
I think being young, I was only 20 when I lost my sight, and the fact that there was so many blokes from different regiments in Selly Oak and at Headley Court, that them 2 years of recovery, it sort of worked because there was no rank, there was no regiments. It was just, you've lost arms, you've lost your leg, you've lost your eyes, and everyone just sort of mingled in, helped each other and built each other up, where when someone was down, there was somebody to take the mick and build them back up again. It was like being back in the block, and it just, I don't know, you took inspiration off other people, and there's lots of other fantastic disabled veterans who have gone on to achieve all sorts of wonderful things. So I took inspiration from them, and I knew I had to do something and start somewhere.
Did you ever feel that you were lucky?
Not lucky, but blessed.
Blessed, yeah.
To be good looking.
Sorry, I don't know who told you that. And the reason I asked that question is because I was in that parachute accident not too long ago, and although, don't get me wrong, I'm like you, Paul, I do feel like I've been very unlucky, but I also feel I've been lucky not to be paralysed.
100%.
Lucky to still be alive. And that's sort of what I meant by that. I don't want to downplay your injuries, because you certainly aren't good looking anymore.
What's wrong with your eyes?
Maybe I'm the one that's blind.
No, I feel blessed. You look at, am I better off than a triple amputee? Or am I worse off? Where do you define the line? I can still, run around and do everything I want to do. But the only thing, I need assistance with certain little things. But those that are triple amputee, some of them are stuck in electric wheelchairs, and,
Yeah.
And it's easy to put weight on when you're in that situation, because you've only got one arm to pump the heart, and so I don't know who's blessed and who's not. What is a good situation? So 2 of my mates come back as triples. So yeah, sometimes I just think I am lucky and I am blessed, and it's just the card I've been dealt with, and I've been given a second shot at life, and to make something of it, and I can change people's lives and inspire people, and I've got a 12-year-old son, and I want nothing more to inspire him and be proud of me.
Mate, I'm 100% sure he is, mate, and we'll talk more about the challenge. But Frenchy as well. It's not just Paul that's here, so tell us about your time in the military, because you did a few tours, had a few close scrapes, and now you're working for SAFA. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I joined before September 11th, so before the Twin Towers.
Sweat. You had to get that one in, did he, Paul?
So my first tour was in Northern Ireland, in Londonderry, which was still an operational tour, but it was definitely the very tail end of Northern Ireland. So there's still some things happening. But my father did 6 tours in Northern Ireland, including in a camp that I was in. So it's quite weird that 30 years later I stood in the same camp, but it was a lot safer when I was there than when he was there. And I was there when the Twin Towers happened.
Yeah.
But I missed out on the invasion of Iraq. Instead, went back for another tour of Northern Ireland. Then went to Iraq in 2005, and then on to Afghanistan in 2006, and sort of tours from there. So the reason I sort of say it like that is I think it's very different. I joined when there wasn't a lot going on, and I got a slow build up into Iraq and Afghanistan. And when I was on my third tour of Afghan, there was young 18-year-olds that joined knowing they were going there, and they were 18. Like at 18 when I was in Northern Ireland, I was still a little troublesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure anyone who was
A little scally.
in the Coldstream Guards at the time would tell you that I wasn't the greatest of soldiers at that point. I was more interested in getting in trouble and drinking.
Boozing and women.
So, yeah. But well, I was so skinny, there wasn't really women involved. It was mainly just alcohol and trouble. But yeah, so I had that sort of in. So by the time I was in Afghanistan, and I went to got a platoon in 3 para called the Guards Parachute Platoon. I was lucky enough I got to go back and forward then between the paras and the Guards, so that's why I got some extra tours in. So a couple of sort of back-to-back ones with different regiments. But that meant that I had all that sort of experience before I was there, and it wasn't so much of a shock. It was like that slow sort of intro. So 2006, the invasion of Helmand was definitely a fruity tour. There wasn't IEDs at that point, but there was a lot of scrapping, a lot more than on the later tours in terms of firefights and calling in air and everything else, and very different rules of engagement as well on that.
I had a friend, so he was in 5.9 and he went on Herrick 5, and he said the difference to when we went on Herrick 9 was night and day. He said on Herrick 5 we had CBA, that was it, and then you had all the off-spray and all that, and he said, mate, you just needed to be light on your feet, because that is all you were doing, mate, scrapping. He said it was wild. He said he compared it to the Wild West, so it's interesting.
They did, because I had Osprey in Iraq in 2005, the first Osprey, the ones with those stupid collars and sleeves that I had to wear on top cover, just to make you extra hot. And and they brought in the sort of the first that Osprey out to Afghan in 2006, and Stuart Tootle was command officer, and I wasn't there, but we got told he got a couple of guys to try it on, and then get over walls, read map stuff, and he was like, "Nah, send that home. We're not blokes aren't wearing that." And we were in CBA with a little plates over your heart, paralids that wouldn't stop anything, and so it was weird. And when I was talking to younger guys on later tours, and the press would say we haven't got enough kit and everything else, and they'd be saying we haven't got enough kit, and I'm saying we didn't have mini-me's, we didn't have 6 hours, we didn't have plate carriers and big plates and all this stuff. We've got a lot more now than we did only 3 years before. And in terms of Kazivacs, we'd take casualties in 2006, and the RAF wouldn't come and get them because the threat level was too high on the helicopters, and we'd end up relying on the Americans or someone else to come and get them. So we'd have wounded or even killed people who'd take 24 hours to be Kazivac'd. And Herrick 11 was my last Afghan tour, and we'd have triple amputees who were on the operating table in Bastion in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It was the medical. It's the one positive that tends to come out of these wars is medical stuff moves on so much in those periods, and then procedures and kit and equipment and everything else. So I'm not saying it was safer on the later tours, because then you had the IEDs.
Yeah.
But it was just so different, the comparison, and it's a pretty short period of time. And I now look back, at the time it seemed like ages between Herrick 4 and Herrick 11, but so that's 2006 and 2009/10. Herrick 11 was a winter tour. But that's not long at all.
No.
But the kit, the tactics, the Taliban, everything completely changed in that period. And it's I can't tell you which one's a worse tour. I know because we had a lot more people. Later, the amount of troops increased hugely in numbers. 3 Power were on their own at the start, and then we're bringing in people from I think it's the Fusiliers and the Gurkhas to take over, because we were getting sort of pinned down in fobs by political pressure. I believe it was that command officer was getting made to put a company in Sangin, and then he's down a company, put a company in Muscala, and now we've only got a reserve company, and then Nowzad and Garesh. They were the 4 main hotspots, and Kajaki. Well, it was not at that stage, because it was really we had those sort of main hotspots, and it changed tour by tour, because I know we went into Garesh and there wasn't really much going on, and we were like, oh, it's the safest place in Afghan. And then the Marines had a terrible time there, and they took over from us, and it moved and it changed. And anyone who was there involved in the tours, it completely changed from tour to tour, where Taliban were increasing numbers in one area, or pressure, or trying to do something. You could look at them as a ragtag army and terrorists, and in some ways they were, but their commanders still had battle plans.
Yeah.
And I believe at the start it was a bit like we were soldiers. They wanted to wipe out one of the camps, so Sangin or Muscala, overrun it, take everyone out, and then we would have left. And we 100% would have. If we lost 130 men in one place, political pressure, public pressure, there's no way we would have stayed.
It's like, Black Hawk Down.
Yeah.
And when you watch documentaries about that, and the boys said we didn't want to leave after that, but he said the political pressure that comes with seeing US servicemen dragged through the streets of Mogadishu.
Yeah.
So it would have been exactly the same if that ends up on CNN, Al Jazeera TV.
Even more so at the start of a campaign.
Oh yeah, it's easier then, isn't it? Because there's less people there. We'll just get rid of them. Like, we'll bring them home.
And it's that the public are then asking a question. They wake up. Black Hawk Down, great example. They woke up that morning. They didn't even know there were soldiers in Somalia. They never even heard of Somalia. And yet they're waking up and they're googling where Somalia is and wondering why there's loads of dead Americans there.
Yeah, and as well, you mentioned changing tactics. And unfortunately, I never got to go to Afghanistan, but it's very funny speaking to you, Paul. I'm like, unfortunately, I didn't get to go, but you said everything. You join up, that's where you want to go. Mm-hmm. But I look at people like yourself, you've got to be careful what you wish for. That was your first tour, it could have been my first tour. So, and sorry, the point I was going to make about changing tactics was, were you the year when they went to low metal content IEDs?
Yeah.
You didn't stand a chance. You don't stand a chance without Valen.
No.
Trying to pick up carbon rods.
But that showed the speed that changed as well. So I came off Herrick 8 and then went back to the Guards and were training for Herrick 11. And that's when the Valem had really come in. Barely seen it on Herrick 8, unheard of on Herrick 4. And the young guys, the young 18-year-olds were just about to turn 18, were sort of looking to me as section commander, done several tours. And they were like, oh, we did it. Don't worry about it, Valem. We won't be using that. Don't use that out in Afghan. Don't worry about it. And we got out to Afghan, and I was completely wrong. I'd only just left, but the tour had moved on so much that I didn't know what I was talking about when I was telling the guys. And I think, so Herrick 11 was the tour after Paul, and I was based in PB4, which we took a lot of casualties, and we lost 5 of our guys from our company. And I think it worked out.
Was that the rogue policeman?
No, that was the Grenadier Guards.
Grenadiers,
that was on your tour actually. Yeah, but no, they were all from IEDs. The guys who were killed, and obviously for every killed person, there's
several injured.
There'd be at least 3 or 4 amputees, and then more with frag wounds, gunshot wounds, and stuff. So it worked out from the company that went out there. You take away the people who never leave camp. Then got about 100 sort of bayonets that go out in the ground, and I think we had 5 killed, and then about 9 who were single to triple amputees, and then 36 others wounds of one variety or not. So it worked out at almost a 50% chance of being killed or injured, which then leads to the black humour of the soldiers of calling it a Babaji leg lottery, and when people were shot, they would be getting cheered onto their helicopters of like, you've won the lottery, you're going home with all your limbs and things like that. Obviously when they were shot, but they were copious mentis going on the helicopter, and it just showed how much it sort of changed. And we were saying the Valams, they were just something to keep you busy because they weren't finding anything. So it was just something to take your mind off the fact that
those Valons, they're great for finding conventional mines and things like that, and they are a good metal detector. But when your carbon rods, there's such a low metal content that the boys didn't. Well, it was like you said, pot luck, really, wasn't it? I mean, mate, fair play. Got a big old set of Gahunas, boys. So I'll take my hat off to you. So tell us about how you two met, because you work for SAFA now, Paul. Left the military. So yeah, tell us about that and how you two came to know each other.
I don't work for SAFA.
No, sorry, Frenchy, you work for SAFA. God. Tell us about how you end up working for SAFA.
Yeah, so I after being medically discharged myself, I'd done anti-poaching in the army and had a big thing for Africa and the wildlife. So I went into working with safaris for a while, which I got to do some amazing things, but it wasn't a long-term thing. So I then decided I wanted to give back. I had a bit of a dark days of myself. Mental health sort of really took a spiral, and I was pretty close to ending it one day. And a friend of mine managed to talk me out of it and support my wife. She obviously saw what was happening, called them up, and it got me back into running, and that sort of led me back in the right direction, and moved down to the coast, got away from where we were, and that's when I decided to wanted to work for a military charity, but there wasn't any. It was COVID was just hitting, so I went and worked for a homeless charity, and then when I had a chance, I moved over to SAFA, and honestly, I'm saying this because my current employers, but it's the best job I've had since leaving the army. I get to tell all my war stories, and people have to listen whether they want to or not. And I get to work with
Don't worry, Frenchy, I'll get you on the podcast by yourself, and we can just talk about all of your war stories.
But it just it's having that sort of connection back in with the military. It's funny, I left the military and said I want to get as far away from it as possible because I'll be depressed being around the edges and not being involved. But I think having that few years break, and now sort of being back involved and being back with veterans, I want to help. I struggled, and there's people out there struggling who maybe weren't injured as bad as me or saw stuff as me, and then there's plenty that were injured far worse and saw far more than me. And I see I've got a chance. I've got quite a good skill set with project management and building challenges, and it's given me a chance to put that into practice and for what I believe to be an amazing cause.
You probably both know Johnny Mercer, the MP for Plymouth, and what he says, it's not the charity third sector, it's not their responsibility to look after our veterans. If they've been sent somewhere to do a job and they've got injured, the government needs to do more.
I've met him a couple of times. I agree. I think he's really great. He was there the day we actually met each other. And I get that sort of statement quite a lot when I'm fundraising. People are like, well, the government should be doing this, shouldn't be down to charity. It's like, great, get the government to pay for it. Yeah. Or if we're not needed, get rid of all the charities. They're fantastic. Cure cancer, get rid of all the cancer charities. But they're not at the minute, and they're needed, and that's what it's there for. As soon as they're not needed, fantastic, close charities down.
No, but they are definitely 100%.
And yet you can argue all day long that the government should be paying for it, but if they're not, then this is the only option, really. And I think our country we do it a lot more where charities are relied on, because the public are just so much more supporting in that way. And people generally help charities that are close to them for one reason or another. If your child's had leukemia, that's probably you're going to be very keen on that for your whole life. If your mum's had cancer, things like that. And so a lot of the veterans charities, the main support is people who were in the military or the family of. But I say a lot when I go on talks, people think they've got no connection to the military, but the veterans are everywhere. And you go in a room and you say, if you're in the military, stand up. If you're in the reserve, stand up. If your children or your parents were, or your uncles, cousins, your work colleagues, everyone in the room would be stood up. And if it's a work colleague that sits 2 desks down from you and they're suffering from PTSD, that's going to affect your life because they're going to be having outbursts. It's going to be sort of traumatic for you as well. And if it's a family member, even more so. Sadly, the suicide rate is very high at the moment and has been for years. And that is, it's obviously very sad for the veteran that's committing suicide.
But think
But
about
it doesn't end with
their
them.
friends, their family. It's
Exactly.
like you just said.
Children growing up, maybe not even remembering the parents, or growing up with that huge trauma. And it's not blaming the person who's committing suicide, obviously.
No, of course not. No.
Massive depression, mental health issues, and they feel that the world is better off without them. They feel their children better off without them at that moment. If they survive through it, and I know a lot of people who have, they look back and think, I can't believe I nearly did it. I can't believe I was going to leave this and that. And no matter how bad things are, they do always get better. I know it's really cliche saying it, but it always does. And everyone I know who's been through it and survived always says it's better. It always is. And it is that ripple effect that can come from it, and it comes from a death on operations. It comes from suicide as well. I have a friend down in Cornwall who was killed in Afghanistan, and talking to his family recently, within a couple of years of him being killed, both his parents they'd separated and then died. One through drinking a lot of alcohol, and one generally believes through a broken heart. Their youngest boy, the apple of their eye, and a lot of it's not understanding why we're there. And then I think with Afghanistan ending so badly and so openly in the public, just over 2 years ago now, wasn't it? That's had a huge effect on veterans, but the families of those left behind who gave everything out there, or and those killed on operations, but those that came back and then led to suicide or still in depression now, and their whole family's lives are turned upside down by that, and then they're seeing that on the TV.
It's interesting. I'd like to hear your opinion on it, Paul. So you were, lost your sight, severely injured. 2 of your friends died, and then to see the fall of Afghanistan back to the Taliban, how did that make you feel? Because did it almost feel like you'd lost your sight for nothing, or?
Well, I'm still here, aren't I? Do you know what I mean? I still get to be with my son. I still get to be with my loved ones. Whereas those who haven't got their loved ones anymore, I think it's harder for them. I'm trying to see it from all different angles why. But it does hurt. And I think that's why there are so many more.
It hurts me as well. And I didn't even get deployed to Afghan, didn't lose anyone. So I can totally understand why you feel that way.
I think the world we're in now with so much more social media, and we can see things, and there's a lot more answers to things and lots more propaganda. I think, it's. I think that's the anger that we've got, because it was just the way it was done, how it was done. They're prepared to, take these young men, throw them over there, and then when they're no good, just leave them to bear the brunt of the rest of their lives. What's the government done for me? What, I didn't, yeah, I could go into that one all day long. Yeah.
Why don't we talk about something a little bit more positive then? So you two meet at 10 Downing Street.
Love at first sight. I looked into his eyes.
Did he lay it on you? Yeah. But
he did. I had to look up to him now, unfortunately. But that is the first and last time I do that to a guard para.
So what event was at 10 Downing Street that day?
It was the Armed Forces Day. It was like the PM's reception. PM wasn't there, but
who was the PM at the time?
It's Rishi. He's
Rishi.
But, he was in Parliament asking. I can't remember what it was, but there's some tough questions that day. He was in Parliament. So, as a lot of it was around families, it was. I think it was planned that he wasn't meant to be there, but we didn't realise. But Johnny Mercer was there, and Rishi's wife. Sorry, I can't remember her name. Those were the two hosting it, and Johnny's wife was there as well. There was several military charities and a few people who worked for them, and others who were beneficiaries or fundraisers for them and stuff. So it was my first time in 10 Downing Street. I was pretty going there.
My invite must have got lost in the post, eh?
Yeah,
That's understandable.
Less of that. So yeah, you meet, and who? So did you have the idea, Paul? Because I'm just trying to get this. Because go on, you.
Paul's idea was Everest.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first things you spoke to me about.
And then I said I'd been in chat with a fella called Lou Rudd. I don't know if you've ever heard of Lou Rudd.
I thought you were going to say Louis Rolfe then. I was like, what are you talking to my little brother for, you weirdo? No, sorry, Lou Rudd.
Lou Rudd is ex-Special Forces. He works for a company called Shackleton.
Yeah, I have. I've heard of Shackleton.
Yeah, so he does the South Pole. Him and his partner do South Pole expeditions, and he then started talking to me regarding, as we was doing Penny Fan a couple of weeks ago, about a fella called Martin, Captain Martin Hewitt, who was pinged in Afghanistan. He was pinged in his shoulder, and he's severely disabled in his, is it his right arm or his left arm?
His right arm, yeah.
His right arm. And he's gone on to do all these amazing mountains and, down to the South Pole, North Pole, do St. Vincent in a woman's dress, because that's what Paras do. Big it up for the Paras.
Yeah.
And, got talking to Martin, and Frenchy served with Martin, or they were in the same camp or something. And, we've just built this little team around us now, and it's just, I feel I'm at that point in my life now where I want to throw everything into a really exciting next couple of years, just pursuing where I can leave my flag and plant my flag and be the first British war blinded, be the first blind.
Mm.
And, along the way I get to meet amazing people and inspire people, and if it raise a few quid and help people along the way, then there's no harm in that, is there?
Yeah, well, you've met an amazing person in me, if I say so myself. But you're, Frenchy, you've done a few ultra marathons and that, so you come up with the original idea, Paul, we're going to do Everest, and then did you maybe think, hang on, Paul, we can do a little bit more here. Is that how it come about?
We started spinning the yarn, didn't we, and talking and...
Yeah, there's, Everest is Everest. It's the biggest mountain in the world.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the most difficult, but it's up there. Obviously, it's one of the 14...
8,000 metre peaks.
8,000 metre peaks.
29,000.
And you can't take Everest on without a lot of training, a lot of a kit. I mean, you can if you pay enough money,
Yeah.
but then that's not safe, and safety is
Paramount.
at the first point. That everything on this and all of the guides we're using, we know that if we get told to turn around, and Paul knows that if he's on Everest and he's 200 metres from the peak, they say
Mate,
turn around, you have to turn
It's
around.
better to climb another day, mate, as they
That's
say.
it. It's a lot of money, but you can get more.
Yeah.
Or you don't go up. But at the end of the day, Paul's got a son.
Mhm.
He's got a lot to live for.
100%.
So the safety will always be there first. But then it was like, well, if we're going to train for it, there's no point. You Paul's off to Chamonix in a couple of months with Martin Hewitt and the Adaptive Grand Slam guys. And that's going to be the start of the training, and then straight back into Snowdon. And then the first mountain is Mount Tubgal, which is going to be a good challenge on itself. And if anyone hasn't done it, it's the highest mountain in North Africa, and it's only an hour and a half from Marrakesh.
If anyone hasn't done it, who do you think's listening to this, Frenchy? I haven't done it.
But it's a great one to start with.
Yeah.
I did it a couple of months ago with my wife, and it's a great challenge to start with. But we decided to do it in winter, so then they've got the extra training, and it won't just be Mount Tubgal, which is the highest peak in North Africa. We're going up the second and third highest peaks as well, so doing them in training to do the highest. So there'll be the three highest peaks in the Atlas Mountains, completed over basically a long weekend for that mountain, for that one, and then it's those building on. So not just doing them as quickly as possible to get as much training and everything out of it, and also trying to inspire people. Veterans obviously is going to be a big part of what we do, me being Safa and both of us being veterans. But it's not just veterans that want to inspire with Paul's journey. It's that anyone with a disability, physical disability of course, but the people who are scared to leave their house or worried about doing anything. I'm not saying get yourself up Everest,
Yeah.
but I do a lot with park run, and my wife does a lot with park run, and you see the guys and girls doing couched 5K and things. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I love it, mate.
It's getting people to set a target and go for it. And the amount of people I've met who had signed up to do a couched 5k and then are running Brighton Marathon or something. They started a year ago and thinking they can't run 5 kilometres, which I know to people in the army seems very
No, but
easy.
it's not. But you're right. It's not about that. It's like my grandma goes to the gym and she goes to yoga and she says, "Oh, if I don't use it, I'll lose it." And we were at the gym together today, training separately, and she goes, "Oh, I get embarrassed."
Show you up?
Yeah, she would. She's there, about big 100-kilo dumbbells, like ideal. But she was like, "Oh no, I get embarrassed." And I said, "Why? I think it's awesome. Like, don't compare yourself to me or anyone else. Just go and run your own race, and everyone else is their own Everest." So yeah, no, I love that sort of attitude. It doesn't matter what you're doing; you just got to be doing something.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, mate, I love it.
You just never know where it's going to lead. It might lead to a bigger challenge, but it might add years onto your life. It certainly will help with mental health. Running really saved me from my darkest days, and being an infanteer, just idiotic. From signing up to a half marathon, I was signed up to a 250k ultra before leaving the sofa.
Yeah,
with my beer belly, going, well, just to do this.
Yeah, I'll be able to do that. Sweet. Thing is though, when your mates, and it's so true, you talk about inspiring people. When I know people like Paul now and yourself, just doing, like you said, you were like, right, with a beer belly, I'm doing an ultra marathon because my mate who's blind got blown up. And if he can do a marathon, I should be able to do an ultra marathon. And it's funny because, we're all sat here, both of you got medically discharged. And sometimes when I feel sorry about myself and my injury, I'm like, hang on. When I read Paul's write-up, I'm like, bloody hell, if he's doing all that and he's, been through all that, like, I'm sure I can get up and go to the gym. And you're in a parachute accident yourself and draw inspiration. So you've already inspired me, boys. So I appreciate that so much. And boys, we are running out of time, but I want to say I could speak to you two all morning because you've got a great story. But I just want to leave with one final question, all right? So if you could give some advice to someone, that's struggling, maybe going through it, what would be your advice? And we'll start with you, Frenchy. So Paul, you got a little bit of time to think of a good answer here, mate.
I'd say sort of back yourself and take a punt on things. At the end of the day, we're very lucky, the country we live in, and we've all got different backgrounds. My upbringing was a lot easier than in Paul's, being a pad brat and comfortable upbringing. But you think, oh, I might lose out on going for this job, for this adventure, for this whatever. But we never lose out. We're not in a Horn of Africa here.
Yeah.
We're in a very safe country. So just take a risk on things. If it doesn't work out, especially when you're young, you've got a million more chances to do things.
Yeah, no, love that, mate. You've got to take a punt. You've got to take some risks. Now, Paul, go on. What would your bit of advice be?
Take the risk or lose the chance. Always follow your heart, follow your guts, and try and do the right thing, and do the right thing by your family.
Come out with a cropper there. Absolutely awesome. Boys, thank you so much for coming down. I really appreciate it. And just finally, tell us about the challenge that you've got coming up on the 14th of October.
Yeah, so this is the start of the 10 Peaks, so Mount Snowdon, and it's just, there's no sign up, there's no like fundraise target or anything, just people just turn up, either wave Paul off at the start, get a train up, wave him in at the top, or preferably come walk a bit with us. Then you can say, as in Paul's words, in 4 years' time, when you're seeing him on the TV summit in Everest, you can say, I did the first mountain with him, and it'd be great to get as many people as possible involved with the start of this journey.
Boys, absolutely love it. Thank you so much. And that is the end of today's episode. Guys, if you enjoyed it, please could you follow, like, and subscribe, as it really helps grow the podcast. Thank you for listening.